Wall Street. Attorney General Eric Holder may be drumming up new cases against financial firms for their roles in the economic meltdown over 5 years ago. Holder speaking to the Wall Street Journal and warning, quote, anybody who's inflicted damage on our financial markets should not be of the belief that they are out of the woods because of the passage of time, which sounds kind of ominous. And Congressman Dan Kildee from Michigan has been pressing justice to investigate JPMorgan, and he joins me now on the phone from Flint. We appreciate your being here, Congressman Kildee. You know, it occurs to me that if there were really rampant criminality across all of Wall Street that led to the meltdown, those guys would have been convicted by now. This is 5 years later. Maybe Wall Street was incredibly stupid and careless, but wasn't criminal. What do you say?
Well, I think whatever time passed doesn't erase the fact. So it may be arguable that the Justice Department should have looked at this earlier. I suspect what's happening is that these are complicated cases. The energy case, for example, that I pressed to get the Justice Department to look at, those trades began in 2009, and it took a FERC investigation, a settlement of that claim to raise this to the level of a criminal investigation. But look, there are plenty of cases of criminal investigations across the spectrum, not just on Wall Street, but across the spectrum that take time. And I think what the Attorney General said is right. Just because there's been the passage of time, we can litigate why it's taken so long. Doesn't erase the fact. If laws were violated, and particularly if the criminal code was violated, those facts will come to light in the course of the investigation and in the course of prosecution. But I don't think it's inappropriate that these cases should go forward.
But at what point does it turn more political and aimed at persecution rather than prosecution? At what does it start hurting the recovery? You know, what about the idea of a Wall Street amnesty, some kind of reconciliation commission where we can move forward instead of looking backward 5 years to a meltdown that all of us were a part of? Investors wanted higher yields, so we invested in riskier assets, and then later we want a settlement from Wall Street because our assets went down. You know, Congress, both parties fueled the housing bubble by making loans incredibly cheap so that people who never should have been given a loan got them willy-nilly. What about just moving forward? Isn't this kind of a lot of political scalp taking?
Well, think about what you're saying, and think about it in the context of the typical crimes that are prosecuted. I don't think we ever say that since it took 4 or 5 years to identify the person who walked into the bank with a gun and stole money, that, you know, let's sort of move on from that. We wouldn't say that. This is a case where there were clearly policy judgments that were made and errors that were made. What this investigation has to do with is whether there was criminal wrongdoing. And I have great faith in our justice system that it will be able to ferret out that question. And I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to say that because, well, you know, we've kind of gone past the financial crisis, let's not apply the same scrutiny to people who may have had criminal liability for acts go beyond simply regulatory failure or beyond simply a bad business judgment, that actually go into individuals enriching themselves by violating law.
Yeah, but Congressman, at some point, you got to do better than coming up with maybe just fabulous fab. And those big guys, if they're really criminal, I think we would have already indicted them by now. Just one last question, sir. Do you think that Wall Street generally is honest?
I think generally most people are honest, including people on Main Street and people on Wall Street. But I think rules ought to apply the same in every environment. I know in my hometown of Flint, if someone breaks the law, even if it was 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, and they end up getting caught and they are revealed to have done something that is against the law, they would have to pay a price. So I think while most people are honest, and most people in the financial industry are honest, they are all being painted with the broad brush. And until we root out those who are clearly criminally liable, if they are, then we won't have a system that has the integrity that it ought to.
All right. We appreciate your being with us today. Thank you so much, Congressman Dan Kildee.